The message appeared on every job board across the Galactic Union. It sat there for 6 months. Nobody touched it. Supervisor read through the rejection notices for the 100th time. Her 4 eyes blinked slowly as she scrolled through the list. The mining corporation had refused. The engineering guild had refused. The salvage collective had refused. Even the, who were famous for taking dangerous work, had sent back a polite letter explaining why they would not send their people to die. The job was simple to explain but impossible to complete. Deep in the cluster, far from any inhabited world, there floated an ancient space station. The Union had designated it Omega 9. It was a death trap wrapped in metal and forgotten history. Pulled up the survey reports again. The station was old. Nobody knew who had built it or why. The original crew had died there thousands of years ago. Since then, the place had become a graveyard of hazards. The hull had dozens of breaches that leaked atmosphere into space. The reactor cores were unstable and leaked radiation at levels that would kill most species in hours. Strange fungal growths had spread through entire sections, producing spores that could dissolve flesh. And worst of all, the gravity generators were broken in ways that made no sense. They would work normally one moment, then reverse completely the next, then pull sideways, then stop entirely. The Union needed the station cleared. There were rumors of valuable technology inside. More importantly, the unstable reactors posed a danger to nearby shipping lanes. If they exploded, the blast could destroy everything within a light year. But nobody would take the job. Was about to close the file and report another failed month when a new notification appeared. Someone had applied. She opened the application with trembling fingers. The company name was unfamiliar. Human Hazard Solutions. The species listed was human. Leaned back in her chair. Humans. She had heard stories about them. They had joined the Galactic Union only 60 years ago, which made them one of the youngest species in the organization. They were strange creatures. They came from a world that seemed designed to kill them, filled with predators and disasters and diseases. Yet they had not only survived but spread across their solar system before making contact with the Union. The other species found them unsettling. Humans smiled when they were nervous. They laughed at danger. They took jobs that any sensible being would refuse. Some called them brave. Others called them insane. Most simply tried to avoid working with them. Reviewed the company's credentials. They were legitimate. They had completed hazard removal jobs on 3 other stations, 2 contaminated planets, and 1 ship that had been classified as a total loss. Their safety record was acceptable. Their prices were reasonable. She approved the contract before she could change her mind. The human ship arrived 2 weeks later. It was an ugly vessel, covered in patches and repairs that suggested it had seen hard use. The name painted on the side was the Stubborn Mule, watched from the observation deck of her own ship as the humans docked with the station's only functioning airlock. 5 figures emerged. They wore heavy suits designed for hostile environments, but they moved with an easy confidence that surprised her. Most species approaching Omega 9 showed fear. These humans acted like they were walking into an ordinary workplace. The leader introduced himself over the communication channel. His name was, and he was the captain of the crew. His voice was calm and friendly, with a slight accent that translator struggled to process. "Supervisor," he said, "we've reviewed the briefing materials. We're ready to begin whenever you give the word." "You understand the dangers?" asked. She felt she had to ask, even though they must have read the reports. Radiation, toxic atmosphere, biological contamination, unstable gravity listed. "Yes, we understand." "The mortality rate for this mission has been calculated at 94%. There was a pause, then heard something that confused her. The humans were laughing. "We've had worse odds," said a female voice. Checked her records. That would be the engineer. "Remember that reactor job on station?" "Don't remind me," another voice groaned. "The medic. I still have nightmares about the coolant leak." "You were fine," said a fourth voice, the specialist. "A little radiation never hurt anyone." "That is literally untrue," replied. The fifth human said nothing. According to his file, he was the salvage expert, quiet but extremely competent. Did not understand their behavior. They were joking. They were about to enter one of the most dangerous locations in the known galaxy, and they were making jokes about previous near-death experiences. "Captain," she said carefully, "I want to be clear. The Galactic Union will not be held responsible for any deaths that occurred during this mission. You have accepted full liability." "We know," said, his voice was still cheerful. "Don't worry, Supervisor, we've read the fine print. We know what we signed up for." "Then why?" The question escaped before could stop it. "Why would you take this job? 27 other companies refused. Species with far more experience in hazardous environments refused. Why would humans accept?" The communication channel was quiet for a moment. When spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "You know what humans do, Supervisor. When we see a job that nobody else wants to do, we get curious. We ask ourselves why. Usually the answer is that it's too hard or too dangerous or too unpleasant. And then we ask ourselves another question. Can we do it anyway? And if the answer is no, then we try to figure out how to make the answer yes," chuckled. "Omega-9 is dangerous, we know that, but dangerous doesn't mean impossible. It just means we have to be careful, we have to be smart, we have to look out for each other. That's what humans do. We face the hard things because someone has to face them." Considered his words. She had managed hazardous operations for over 40 years. She had worked with dozens of species. Never had she encountered one that spoke about danger this way. Most beings avoided risk. They calculated odds and made sensible decisions. The idea of deliberately choosing danger simply because it existed was alien to her in a way that had nothing to do with biology. "Very well," she said finally. "You have authorization to proceed. Good luck, Captain." "Thanks," replied. "But we don't believe in luck, we believe in preparation." The channel closed, watched on her monitors as the 5 humans entered the airlock. The ancient door groaned shut behind them, cutting them off from safety. Inside Omega-9, the darkness waited. The first thing noticed was the smell. Even through his filtered helmet, he could detect something wrong in the air. It was the smell of decay mixed with chemicals that his suit's computer could not identify. The readout on his visor showed a long list of toxic compounds. Any one of them would have killed an unprotected human in minutes. "Air quality is terrible," reported. She was checking her own instruments with practiced efficiency. "I'm reading methane, hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, and at least 3 compounds I've never seen before. Everyone keep your seals tight." "Understood," the team replied together. They stood in a narrow corridor. The walls were made of some dark metal that absorbed their flashlight beams. Emergency lights flickered overhead, casting red shadows that made the passage look like the inside of a dying animal. The floor was covered in dust and debris that had accumulated over centuries. Moved to a control panel on the wall. It was dead, like everything else, but she began working on it anyway. Her fingers moved quickly over the alien interface. "I might be able to restore partial power to this section," she said. "The systems are old, but the basic architecture is similar to pre-Union technology. Give me a few minutes." "Take your time," said. "Start mapping our route, monitor everyone's vitals, keep scanning for biological hazards." The team spread out, each member focused on their task. This was how they worked. No wasted motion, no unnecessary conversation. They had trained together for years and they moved like parts of a single machine. Activated his mapping drone. The small device rose from his pack and floated ahead, its sensors building a 3-dimensional model of the station's layout. The results appeared on everyone's visors, showing corridors and chambers stretching into the darkness. "The station is bigger than the report suggested," said quietly. "I'm reading at least 40 distinct sections. Many of them are blocked by debris or hull breaches." "We'll clear them one at a time," replied. A soft hum filled the corridor. The emergency lights brightened slightly, stepped back from the control panel with a satisfied nod. "Partial power restored. We have basic lighting and life support in this section. The radiation shielding is still offline, but it's better than nothing." "Good work, let's move." They advanced slowly, checking every corner and doorway. The station felt wrong in ways that were hard to describe. It was too quiet, too still. The air did not move. The only sounds were their own footsteps and breathing. In the third corridor, they found the first body. It was not human. It was not any species that any of them recognized. The creature had been tall and thin, with 4 arms and a head that seemed too large for its body. It was dressed in what might have been a uniform, though the fabric had rotted away to almost nothing. The body itself was preserved by the station's cold vacuum, frozen in time like a photograph of death. Knelt beside it, running his scanner over the remains. "Dead for approximately 8,000 years, he reported. "Cause of death appears to be blunt trauma. Something hit this being very hard." "Or through it," said. She pointed to cracks in the wall nearby. "Look at the impact pattern. The body hit the wall with enough force to crack metal. That suggests a sudden gravity shift." They all understood what that meant. The gravity failures were not a recent problem. They had been happening for thousands of years. The original crew had died here, killed by the station's own broken systems. "Document it and move on," ordered. "We can't help the dead. We can only finish the job they started." They found more bodies as they advanced. Some were alone. Some were in groups, clustered together as if seeking comfort in their final moments. One chamber contained dozens of them, piled against a sealed door that they had never managed to open. "Examine the door's lock mechanism." "They were trying to reach the escape pods," she said. "The lock failed. They couldn't get through." "Can you open it now?" "Already done." The door slid open with a grinding protest. Beyond it was a small bay containing 6 escape pods. All of them were still in their cradles, unused. The original crew had died meters away from safety, trapped by a simple malfunction. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to say. They continued deeper into the station. The radiation levels increased steadily. Watched the dosimeter readings with concern. "We're approaching the safe threshold," he warned. "Another hour at these levels and we'll need to rotate out." "Noted," said. "We'll work fast." The next section was flooded with a thick green liquid that their scanners identified as coolant from the reactor system. It was toxic to most known life forms. Contact with bare skin would cause severe chemical burns. "I'll go first," volunteered. "My suit has the heaviest shielding." She waded into the liquid without hesitation. It rose to her waist, then her chest. Her suit's integrity held but could see the warning lights blinking on her status display. The coolant was trying to eat through her protective layers. "Move quickly," he ordered. They crossed the flooded section in single file. On the other side, suit was smoking slightly. The outer layer had been damaged, but she was unharmed. "That was unpleasant," she said. "Let's not do that again." "Agreed," replied. "I'm reading massive biological contamination ahead. The fungal growth starts in the next section." Looked at the map on his visor. The fungal infection covered nearly a quarter of the station. It would take days to clear. He took a deep breath and adjusted his flamethrower unit. "Then let's get started." The first spores hit them 5 steps into the infected zone. They were small and green, floating in the air like dust. Where they landed on surfaces, tiny patches of growth appeared within seconds. "They're fast," observed. "Faster than anything I've ever seen." "That's why we brought fire," said. The flamethrowers activated with a roar. Streams of superheated plasma swept across the walls and floor, burning away the fungal growth. The spores died in the heat before they could spread. Slowly, meter by meter, the team advanced. It was exhausting work. The heat inside their suits became almost unbearable. Sweat dripped into their eyes. Their arms ached from holding the heavy equipment. But they did not stop. They did not complain. They simply kept moving forward, burning away the infection that had claimed this part of the station. 4 hours later, they had cleared 20 meters. "Enough for today," announced. "We'll seal this section and continue tomorrow." They retreated to their ship to rest and recover. Supervisor watched their progress reports with amazement. In one day, the humans had accomplished more than any other species would have attempted in a week. She began to understand why they had taken this job. They were not afraid of the darkness. They brought their own light. The second week was harder than the first. They had cleared the fungal infection after 5 brutal days of burning and scrubbing. The protocols were exhausting. Every time they left the infected zone, they had to go through decontamination. Their suits had to be cleaned. Their equipment had to be checked. Even their ship had to be sprayed with chemicals to ensure no spores had survived. Supervised the process with obsessive attention. She understood what a single surviving spore could do. If the fungus escaped the station and reached a populated world, the results would be catastrophic. "All clear," she announced after each check. "We're clean." They moved on to the radiation zones. This was specialty. As the team's medic, he had trained extensively in radiation medicine. He knew exactly how much exposure the human body could survive. He monitored everyone's dosimeters constantly, rotating team members out when their levels got too high. "You're at 60% of safe exposure," he reported during their 3rd day in the hot zone. "Take a break." "I'm almost done with this conduit," she protested. "The conduit can wait. Your bone marrow can't take a break." Grumbled but obeyed. She knew was right. The radiation would not kill her immediately. It would work slowly, damaging her cells over time, causing cancers and organ failures that might not appear for years. She retreated to the ship while took her place. The reactor leaks were worse than expected. The original crew had attempted repairs before they died, but their patches had failed long ago. Radioactive material had spread through entire sections, contaminating everything it touched. Made a difficult decision. "We can't save all of it," he told the team during their evening briefing. "Some sections are too damaged. We'll have to seal them permanently and focus on what we can recover." Nobody argued. They had seen the contamination levels. Some parts of Omega-9 would never be safe for any living creature. The best they could do was contain the damage and prevent it from spreading. They worked through the hot zones systematically. Seal a breach here. Reroute a power line there. Replace damaged shielding where possible. Bury the rest in concrete foam that would block radiation for centuries. By the end of the 2nd week, they had contained 80% of the radiation hazards. Then the gravity failed. It happened without warning. One moment was walking normally down a corridor. The next moment, he was falling upward. He slammed into the ceiling with enough force to crack his visor. Air began hissing out through the tiny fracture. "Is hit," shouted over the communication channel. Reacted instantly. He activated his magnetic boots and pushed off toward the captain. The gravity was still reversed, so he had to think of the ceiling as the floor. It was disorienting, but he had trained for this. He reached in seconds. The captain was conscious but dazed. Blood floated from a cut on his forehead, forming perfect red spheres in the reversed gravity. "Seal kit," ordered, pulling an emergency patch from his belt. He slapped it over the cracked visor and pressed hard. The smart material bonded with the damaged surface, stopping the air leak. "Can you move?" he asked. Nodded slowly. "I think so. What happened?" "Gravity reversal. We need to get to a stable zone." The gravity shifted again. This time it went sideways, pulling them toward the left wall, grabbed a support beam and held on. Did the same. Their bodies dangled horizontally as the artificial gravity tried to drag them in the wrong direction. "This is insane," said. She was on the other side of the section, clinging to a door frame. "The gravity generators are completely unpredictable. There's no pattern." "Can you fix them?" asked. "Not from here. The main control systems are in the station's core. We haven't reached that section yet." The gravity shifted again, returning to normal so suddenly that everyone crashed to the floor, groaned as the impact jarred his injured head, immediately began checking him for concussion. "Mild traumatic brain injury," he diagnosed. "You need to rest." "We can't stop," protested. "We're not stopping, you're stopping. The rest of us will continue." Wanted to argue, but he knew was right. A concussion in a hazardous environment was a death sentence waiting to happen. He let help him back to the ship while the others continued working. For the next 3 days, the team operated with only 4 members, took over leadership while recovered. She pushed them hard, knowing that every hour spent in the station increased their risks. The gravity continued to malfunction randomly. They learned to expect it, keeping their magnetic boots activated at all times. They installed handholds along every corridor they cleared. They moved in pairs, always ready to catch each other if the floor became the ceiling. On the 4th day, arm snapped. The gravity had shifted violently, going from normal to triple strength in less than a second. The sudden force drove to his knees. He put out his hand to catch himself, and the bones in his forearm cracked under the pressure. He screamed, then immediately controlled himself. Pain was just information. He could deal with information. "Broken radius and ulna," he reported through gritted teeth. "Clean break. I can set it myself." "You need to evacuate," said. "No, we're too close to the core. I can still work with one arm." He proved it by injecting himself with painkillers and immobilizing the broken arm in a splint. 30 minutes later, he was back on duty, monitoring vital signs with his remaining good hand. Supervisor watched through the station's cameras, which had restored to partial function. She had observed many hazardous operations in her career. She had never seen anything like this. The humans simply refused to give up. When the environment tried to kill them, they adapted. When their equipment failed, they improvised. When their bodies broke, they patched themselves together and kept moving. By the end of the 3rd week, had recovered enough to return to duty. His head still ached, but he ignored it. There was too much work to do. "Final push," he told the team. "The core is just ahead. Once we stabilize the gravity generators and shut down the main reactor, this station will be safe." "Define safe," said with a tired smile. "Safe enough that someone else can finish the job. We clear the worst hazards. They handle the cleanup." "Sounds good to me," agreed. They gathered their equipment and prepared for the final assault on Omega-9's heart. Behind them, weeks of work showed their progress: sealed breaches, neutralized radiation, burned fungus, cleared corridors. Ahead of them, the darkness waited. But they had come too far to stop now. The door to the station's core had not been opened in 8,000 years. Stood before it, studying the ancient locking mechanism with the same focus she gave to every problem. Behind her, the team waited in tense silence. "The lock uses a combination of biometric scanning and encrypted codes," she reported. "The biometric scanner is dead. The encryption is based on mathematical principles I've never seen before." "Can you bypass it?" asked. "Maybe. The power system is still functional. If I can reroute the security protocols through the emergency backup systems, I might be able to trick the door into thinking it's receiving valid authorization." "How long?" "Consider the question. An hour, maybe 2. "Do it." While worked, the others prepared for whatever waited on the other side. checked her chemical neutralizers, organized his medical supplies with his one good hand, their remaining tools and fuel for the flamethrowers. Watched them with quiet pride. His head still hurt from the concussion. His body ached from weeks of hard labor in hostile conditions, but he would not have traded his team for anyone else in the galaxy. 90 minutes later, stepped back from the door. "Ready," she said, "everyone in position." They arranged themselves in a defensive formation, nodded. Pressed a button. The ancient door groaned. Metal scraped against metal as mechanisms that had been dormant struggled to life. Slowly, painfully, the massive barrier slid open. The core of Omega-9 was vast. They stood at the entrance to a chamber that stretched for hundreds of meters in every direction. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them. Massive pillars of machinery rose from the floor, connected by cables and conduits that pulsed with faint light. And at the center of everything, suspended in a web of energy fields, was something that made breath catch in her throat. It was a sphere, perhaps 10 meters in diameter. It glowed with colors that seemed to shift between visible spectrums, passing through shades of light that human eyes were not designed to perceive. Energy crackled across its surface in patterns that looked almost like writing. "What is that?" whispered. Approached slowly, her scanner working frantically to analyze the readings. The data made no sense. The sphere was producing energy levels that should have been impossible. It was generating gravity fields that explained all the random fluctuations they had experienced throughout the station. "I think," she said carefully, "this is why the station was built. Whatever species lived here, they created this place to contain this object." "What is the object?" asked. "I don't know. My instruments can't identify it. The energy signature doesn't match anything in the Union's database. This technology predates everything we know about." Moved closer to the containment web. She could see cracks in the energy field. Bright lines of force arced through the gaps, discharging into the surrounding machinery. Each discharge caused the gravity throughout the station to hiccup. "The containment is failing," she said. "That's what's causing all the problems. The field is breaking down and the energy is leaking out." "Can we repair it?" asked. Shook her head. "The technology is too advanced. I can barely understand what I'm looking at, let alone fix it." "Then what are our options?" The team fell silent. They had come so far. They had survived radiation and toxic atmosphere and killer fungus and gravity that tried to crush them against walls. But this was different. This was something beyond their experience. Spoke first. "We could leave, report our findings to the Union, let them send specialists." "The containment won't last that long," replied. "Look at the degradation rate. This field is going to fail completely within days, maybe hours." "What happens when it fails?" asked. Nobody answered, but they all understood. The energy contained in that sphere was enormous. When it was released, the explosion would destroy the station. It would destroy their ship. It would destroy everything within a light year. Made his decision. "We're not leaving," he said. "We took this job, we finished this job." "How?" asked. "I told you I can't repair the containment field." "Then don't repair it, shut it down." Stared at him. "Shut it down. If we release that energy without proper containment, the results could be catastrophic. More catastrophic than letting the field fail on its own." Considered the question. She ran calculations in her head, consulting the readings from her scanner. Slowly, her expression changed. "Maybe not," she admitted. "If we can control the release, bleed the energy off gradually instead of letting it explode all at once, it would still be dangerous, but it might be survivable." "What would that require?" "I'd need to interface directly with the containment system, bypass the automatic controls and manage the power levels manually. It would take hours, and if I make a mistake, even a small one, we all die." "Can you do it?" Looked at the glowing sphere. She thought about her training, her experience, all the impossible problems she had solved over the years. Then she thought about her team, her friends, the people who trusted her with their lives. "Yes," she said, "I can do it." The next 6 hours were the most intense of their lives. Worked at the main control interface, her fingers flying over alien symbols that she was learning to understand through pure trial and error. The sphere's energy readings fluctuated wildly as she made adjustments, each change bringing them closer to stability or disaster. The others supported her in every way they could, monitored the structural integrity of the chamber, watching for signs of collapse, tracked the energy discharges, warning when dangerous spikes were approaching, kept everyone's vital signs stable, forcing them to take breaks and drink water even when they wanted to keep working. Coordinated everything. He watched the big picture while his team focused on their individual tasks. He made decisions when needed guidance. He kept morale high when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them. The gravity fluctuated constantly. Sometimes they were pressed to the floor with crushing force. Sometimes they floated weightlessly in the air. The temperature swung between freezing and boiling as the sphere's energy affected the station's environmental systems. Through it all, they kept working. Finally, after 6 hours and 23 minutes, entered the last command. The sphere's glow began to fade. The energy discharges slowed, then stopped. The gravity stabilized, returning to a gentle standard pull. The temperature settled into a comfortable range. The containment field had not been repaired. It had been rendered unnecessary. Had found a way to drain the sphere's excess energy safely, channeling it into the station's power grid where it could be stored or released harmlessly into space. The ancient technology was now dormant, safe. "It's done," said. Her voice was barely a whisper. Nobody cheered. They were too tired, too drained. They simply sat where they were and breathed. Supervisor's voice came over the communication channel. She sounded different than before. There was something in her tone that had not been there at the start of the mission. "Human crew," she said, "what you have done today will be recorded in the Union's history archives. You have saved countless lives." Smiled weakly. "We just did the job," he said, "that's all." "No," replied, "you did much more than that." The final week passed slowly. With the core stabilized, the remaining work was almost peaceful by comparison. They sealed the last hull breaches. They repaired the life support systems so the station could maintain a breathable atmosphere. Everything they had found for the Union science teams who would arrive later. The bodies of the original crew were documented with respect, had discovered enough about the station's records to identify the species. They called themselves the. They had been explorers and scientists, traveling through space in search of knowledge. They had found the strange sphere drifting in deep space and built this station to study it. Something had gone wrong. The containment technology had failed. They had died trying to fix a problem they did not fully understand. 8,000 years later, humans had finished their work. On the last day, before they sealed the station for transfer to the Union's research division, gathered his team in the core chamber. The sphere still floated at the center, but it was dark now, its dangerous energy safely drained. "We should say something," suggested, "for though they died here." Nodded. He was not a religious man, but he understood the importance of honoring those who had come before. "They came here seeking knowledge," he said. "They found something they couldn't control, but they didn't give up. They kept trying until the end. That deserves respect." Placed a small marker near the base of one of the great pillars. It was just a metal plate with words etched into its surface, but it would last for centuries. "In memory of the VATH, who sought to understand, and gave their lives for knowledge." They stood in silence for a moment. Then they gathered their equipment and left. The stubborn mule departed Omega 9 3 hours later. Supervisor watched from her observation ship as the battered human vessel pulled away from the station's airlock and accelerated into open space. She had prepared a formal message of congratulations. She had written and rewritten it a dozen times, trying to capture what she had witnessed over the past month. Nothing seemed adequate. In the end, she sent a simple transmission. Human crew, this is Supervisor. I have submitted my final report to the Galactic Union. Your work has been classified as exceptional. The hazards of Omega-9 have been neutralized. The station has been certified safe for research operations. You have accomplished what 27 other species declared impossible. There was a pause before his voice came back over the channel. He sounded tired but content. Thank you, Supervisor. It was a challenging job. May I ask you something, personally? Of course. Hesitated. She had thought about this question for weeks. It had haunted her every night as she watched the humans risk their lives in that death trap of a station. At the beginning, I asked why humans take jobs like this. You said someone has to do the hard things, but that doesn't explain everything. Other species also recognize necessity. They simply choose not to act on it. What makes humans different? The communication channel was quiet for a long moment. When spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. I've been thinking about that question myself, he admitted. I'm not sure I have a perfect answer, but I'll try to explain. Listened intently. Humans evolved on a dangerous world, continued. Our planet has earthquakes that destroy cities, storms that level forests, diseases that killed millions of us before we learned to fight them. We survived all of that, not because we were stronger or smarter than the threats we faced. We survived because we refused to accept that survival was impossible. He paused, gathering his thoughts. When a volcano erupted, we didn't just run away. We went back afterward to study it, to understand it, to learn how to predict the next eruption. When diseases killed our people, we didn't accept death as inevitable. We searched for cures. We built hospitals. We created medicines that turned fatal illnesses into minor inconveniences. You fought against nature itself, said. We had no choice. Our nature was to survive, and survival meant facing the things that frightened us. In the background, could hear the other humans, was arguing with about the best way to treat his broken arm now that they had proper medical facilities again, was complaining about the smell that had permanently settled into her suit, was already reviewing job postings for their next contract. They did not sound like heroes. They sounded like ordinary people, tired, sore, ready for a hot meal and a good sleep. I think I understand, said slowly. Other species see danger and feel fear. Humans see danger and feel fear too, but then you ask what you can do about it. Exactly, agreed. Fear is just information. It tells us something is dangerous, but it doesn't tell us to give up. It tells us to be careful, to prepare, to work together. Fear is the beginning of the conversation, not the end. Your species is remarkable. Laughed. We're really not. We're just stubborn. We don't like being told something is impossible. It makes us want to prove that it isn't. The transmission began to fade as the human ship moved out of range. Captured the conversation in her personal logs. She suspected it would be studied by researchers across the Union for years to come. Safe travels, Captain, she said. I hope our paths cross again. Same to you, Supervisor. And if you ever have another impossible job that nobody wants to touch, you know where to find us. The channel closed. The human ship became a small dot of light against the stars, then disappeared entirely as it jumped into faster-than-light travel. Remained at her observation post for a long time. She looked at Omega-9, now safe and stable, its ancient mysteries waiting patiently for the scientists who would soon arrive. She thought about the who had built this place and died here. She thought about the humans who had succeeded where so many others had failed. Her report would change how the Galactic Union viewed humanity. She knew that. The other species would read about what had happened here, and they would begin to understand what made humans special. It was not their technology. Other species had better ships and more advanced tools. It was not their intelligence. Other species were smarter in many ways. It was their attitude, their refusal to be defeated by circumstances, their ability to look at something terrifying and ask not, "Why should I face this?" but "How can I overcome this?" Other species dreaded dangerous jobs. They calculated risks and made sensible decisions to protect themselves. Humans calculated risks too, but then they did the job anyway, because someone had to, because giving up was not in their nature, because they had learned, over millions of years of evolution on a hostile world, that the only way to survive was to face their fears and push through them. Began composing her final message to the Union Council. She would recommend that human companies be given priority access to hazardous contracts, not because they were expendable, but because they were effective, because they got things done when everyone else said it could not be done. She ended her report with a simple observation. The humans have a saying. They call difficult tasks a hard day's work. For them, danger is not an obstacle. It is simply part of the job, and unlike every other species in the Union, they do not dread the job. They just do it. Somewhere across the galaxy, aboard a battered ship called the Stubborn Mule, 5 tired humans sat down to dinner together. They complained about their aches and pains. They argued about whose turn it was to cook. They laughed at jokes that would have confused any other species in the universe. Tomorrow there would be another job, another challenge, another impossible task that nobody else wanted to touch. They couldn't wait.